I guess you're wondering why I called you here tonight. Good evening. I'm Jeff Agnor, and I'm one of the founding partners of Davis, Agnor, Rapaport, and Skalny. For those of you who may not be familiar with our firm, we came together more than 20 years ago with a vision of leading a regional law firm that could serve businesses, entrepreneurs, and families while not losing the personal touch with our clients. We remain accessible and responsive as we were when we were a smaller firm. Many of you know we've moved into larger office in downtown Columbia just over a year ago. Since then, our firm has grown in ways that allow us to better serve our clients, to be a resource for our businesses and nonprofit communities. While our new office includes state-of-the-art collaborative space where we've hosted a number of events, obviously tonight's event was a little too large for our office. We're very grateful to our friends at Howard Community College for allowing us to use this beautiful Horowitz Visual and Performing Arts Center. We're delighted to have so many clients and friends and community members with us tonight. Thank you for taking the time this evening to share this important dialogue. There are a number of elected officials, if you hadn't noticed, a number of elected officials in the audience, and we're privileged to have you here tonight. If you are an elected official or a former elected official, would you please stand and be recognized? And now for the main event. I'm joined on stage by our friend and former Governor Larry Hogan. Our firm's newest partner and former Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford. And our managing partner and founding partner, Paul Skalny, who will moderate the discussion this evening. It's also my privilege to welcome former First Lady Yumi Hogan, and former Second Lady Monica Rutherford. Thank you both for joining us tonight. We're here tonight because there are issues our community, and in fact our nation, needs to talk about. Real issues. Sometimes these issues are painful to discuss, and unfortunately in this highly charged political climate, many of us are hesitant to voice our opinions and sometimes even to identify these issues. Even for this event, we sometimes struggled with the question, can we even say that? But if we're going to confront extremism and come together as a country, we must find ways to cut through all the noise and learn to listen to each other. We have to be open-minded to learning where others have been in their lives and what's led them to embrace a particular worldview. We must be empathetic. We must learn to feel other people's pain. In the end, perhaps having open and honest dialogue starts with believing that the vast majority of us are people of goodwill who love their country as much as we love ours, and who desire to find a middle ground. It's certainly not our intent this evening to offend anybody or to single out a particular group of people. Our goal is to engage in candid and authentic and respectful discussion with two distinguished leaders who during their 8 years in office confronted extremism on both sides of the aisle. Our hope is that tonight's discussion is a modest step forward to finding common ground. So before we start, just a few housekeeping notes. Paul Skalny is going to lead our invited guests in a discussion for about 45 minutes. After that, we'll open the floor for questions. Please note that this event is being recorded and that we do have a number of members of the press here this evening. Now let's get to the discussion. I'd like to turn the program over to my good friend and partner, Paul Skalny.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to also welcome everyone and just take a moment to thank you, our clients, our community partners, and friends for joining us for this event. I can't tell you how incredibly excited I am about tonight's program. I can't remember a day when I haven't seen extreme politics on display in the media, heard polarizing and divisive rhetoric, whether on local or global scale. And let's be honest, for those of you that know me, when I've personally struggled straddling the line between politically correct and politically incorrect. And who amongst us can say they've been in the same position? So how do we bridge the gap and find common ground? I can't think of two more uniquely qualified people to join me for this candid conversation than former Governor Larry Hogan and my business partner, former Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford. Many of you may know that the Hogan-Rutherford administration was not only the second ever Republican ticket to be reelected in our state in more than 240 years, but it had also received the highest approval ratings of any administration in state history and among some of the highest in all of the United States. Governor, the numbers don't lie. Thank you. How are you, as a red governor in a blue state, able to sustain such high approval ratings year after year?
Well, first of all, just let me thank you for hosting us tonight.
Sure,
and
pleasure.
I'm very excited to be here with my partner in crime, the Lieutenant Governor. We spent 8 great years together. And he called me and he said, would you mind coming to the firm and sitting down with a few of our clients and having a discussion? I was like, sure, I'd be happy to. And a couple days ago, I found out there was 400 people here at the community college. You guys got a lot of clients, and I appreciate the opportunity. But look, people don't realize that Maryland really is the bluest state in America. I mean, Joe Biden won Maryland by 33 points, and Hillary Clinton won by 31 points. We're Republicans, and we were able to get a second term, second ticket to ever do that. And I think it's because the whole time, we were focused on reaching across the aisle, finding that middle ground where we could all stand together. We never tried to demonize the other side. I mean, we had disagreements. Sometimes we would passionately debate the issues, but we were always looking to try to find common ground. And we ran a campaign that way to get elected in the first place. And we had a group called Change Maryland. We said it's not about Democrats and Republicans, it's about the future of our state. We brought people together. And in my first inaugural, I said the politics that have divided our nation need not divide our state, and that we were going to take the best ideas, regardless of which side of the aisle they came from, and it was going to be the beginning of a new era of bipartisanship. And then we actually delivered on that for 8 years, like 30 miles down the road from our nation's capital, which is nothing but divisiveness and dysfunction. I mean, we've already proven that there is a better path forward, and I think the voters rewarded us for that. Regardless of what their party affiliation was, they appreciated the job that we did. And I just want to, besides giving a shout out to Lieutenant Governor and to the First Lady and the Second Lady, they were a big part of our success. But there are a number of people from our administration, cabinet secretaries, people on our staff, and if you would, just give them a round of applause, because we get the credit, but it was a great team of people that worked hard for 8 years.
You know, it's a great segue into talking about partnerships, and I was going to talk about the Lieutenant Governor being such a great partner for you, and obviously it's partners across the state, many of whom are in this room. But let's talk a little bit, Lieutenant Governor. Can you tell us a little bit about how your relationship with the governor contributed to the success of the administration?
Well, we started off by, first of all, he and I worked in the early administration, so we saw how, relationships sometimes work between the Lieutenant Governor and the governor. And so when we were elected, immediately we said, we want to have a joint staff. I said, I don't want to have a separate staff. My predecessor had probably about 14 people, 15 people on his staff. When I started off, we had 3 immediate members in my office, but we had a joint staff. The staff reported to both the governor and myself. course, he was a senior partner in that and makes the final decision. But, I met with the chief of staff, the communications folks, every, week or two, every week with the chief of staff, every 2 weeks with the communications. So it was very seamless in terms of that relationship on the second floor. But we had a relationship even before that. We had entertained together, our families entertained with each other. We wanted to make sure, and I will say our wives made sure that we stayed friends through the whole process too. They were insistent upon that.
Which isn't always the case.
No, I don't want to name names, but I think previous.
It's almost never the case.
Yeah, almost more like never. Previous, and I think.
Name names.
Well, if you talk to someone who knows, like Bruce over there, a lot of the governor or lieutenant governors, they split away from each other at some point during the administration, and that was something that we didn't do.
Well, we were both friends for a long time, and we were cabinet secretaries together. We would always get together. It was talk about all the other guys. So we were kind of buddies to begin with from the early.
Yeah, we were kindred spirits.
Kindred spirits. Can you believe what they're doing now? No, it's just. But we also fit. We trusted one another, and we had different skill sets, and so we came into it like a partnership, and. It really worked well. It really was a friendship and a partnership, and I felt completely comfortable. There were times where I really turned over tremendous amounts of responsibility to the lieutenant governor, knowing that things were going to get run well, and we wouldn't miss a beat.
So during your cancer diagnosis, the Freddie Gray riots, then during the pandemic, you really relied on the lieutenant governor to handle day-to-day affairs of running state operations.
Well, he was involved in everything we did the whole time for 8 years, and he took on major projects like procurement reform, like opioids. There were big projects that he had full responsibility for the whole time. But in those crisis times, instead of, I wanted to focus all of my attention on the crisis at hand, and we still had to run the day-to-day operations of government. And so, the cancer diagnosis was a little different. I mean, I did 24-hour-day chemotherapy, and I still tried to run the government from the hospital bed. But he was running all the staff meetings in the office.
Right.
He wasn't the senior partner then, was he?
And there's some folks out here who remember, we would get texts at 3:30, 4 a.m. in the morning, and then another text at 6 a.m. saying, "How come no one's answering my text?"
They were giving me steroids to combat the chemo, and I was wired all night long, here, get this stuff. What the heck? People would wake up in the morning and say, "Oh my God, we can't wait till he gets better." But so during the riots, I moved to Baltimore. We declared a state of emergency. We sent in 4,000 members of the National Guard and 1,000 police officers, firefighters. I walked the streets of Baltimore, meeting with faith leaders and community leaders, and the lieutenant governor was running the whole rest of the government. I was only focused on, kind of bringing peace and security back to the people of Baltimore. And during COVID, that was incredible. I don't know. I mean, everybody knows, how difficult it was difficult for everybody here. But, we lost almost 15,000 people. We had 53,000 people hospitalized. We had to build an entire infrastructure on testing and vaccines from scratch. We had to communicate with why we're taking these difficult steps and trying to communicate that to people. I focused on nothing but the pandemic. And I turned over the reins of the whole government to the lieutenant governor, said, you have to make sure all the normal stuff is running while I focus on this and get the best advice and make all these tough decisions. So he was a tremendous partner and a huge part of our success.
Yeah. Quite a lesson in leadership.
We worked hard.
Yeah.
Worked hard.
So, Governor, we'll get into this a little bit more with specific examples, but from a macro point of view, what lessons can business owners and community members take away from your success in communicating across the aisle and with people from all walks of life? That's really what this is about, and just figuring out how can we better communicate.
Well, I think communication is really important, and I think one of the things that people gave our administration credit for was that we were pretty direct and straightforward, and people would say, even though I don't agree with you, I believe that you're saying what you believe. They appreciated the direct honesty. I think a lot of times people are frustrated with politicians on both sides of the aisle. They don't really trust whether it's spin or they're trying to, sell you something. I don't think people felt that way with us. So I think direct, honest communication is important. But I never held elective office before this, and neither did the lieutenant governor. And I was in business for 40 years, and actually the business experience helped me in politics. I started out in the real estate brokerage business, and I didn't get paid unless I convinced the two of you to reach agreement in the middle. And I was constantly trying to find a win-win situation and that in the middle ground. In politics, usually you're trying to bash the other guy and beat them. I was about how do we figure out how to solve this problem.
Shouldn't have to be that way.
So I think the business skills we need more business people in politics for one thing.
Yeah. Less career people. Less people who make it a career.
Yeah, I mean, most people are frustrated with professional politicians that spend their entire lives in office, and their main concern is getting reelected. Like, we didn't care about getting reelected, which is why we won in a landslide.
All right, so let's dive right in and discuss how we as a society are having difficulties just communicating with one another. I think we've all been at the dinner table when a topic has come up that immediately shifted the conversation and created tension or arguments amongst family and friends. With Thanksgiving just around the corner, I'm sure some people in this room are already trying to figure out how they're going to navigate that dinner. So I'm maybe utopic, but I sincerely believe that there are many people out there that want to better understand other people's perspectives, but are simply frightened to engage in meaningful dialogue about those topics. Lieutenant Governor, if we're thoughtful and we're respectful, shouldn't we be able to openly discuss really any issues, but issues such as climate change, equity and inclusion, sexual identity and preference, just to name a few? I mean, shouldn't we all be able to have these conversations?
We should. Yes, absolutely. We should be able to do it. And I think a lot of it is how it's approached. The governor talked about trust, and people trusted us, and I think trust is part of it. In conversations, we want to, try to assume what they're thinking or what their motives are. What's behind that question? No, there's nothing behind the question. I'm asking you a question.
Right.
So I think it's where you have to reach that point where people feel comfortable and being able to, really in some cases you have to explain why you're asking that question. I really want to know why you feel this particular way, and when it's something that's different from, the perspective that the other person has. So yeah, I think it's possible, and I think we can do that.
I think it's a huge problem today where people just automatically try to demonize the other side. If you disagree, you can disagree without being disagreeable. It's all about civil discussions and listening. We came in with very strong disagreements with some of the folks. We have a 70-some% progressive Democratic legislature in both houses. We didn't agree on every topic, but we were willing to listen and try to find a middle ground. And we need that in our personal lives,
Right.
Talking about Thanksgiving, I have two very kind of progressive Democratic daughters and one right-wing Republican. And we're going to be sitting around arguing just like the rest of America. But I think today we have a problem in that the loudest, angriest voices get all the attention, and they're fighting, constantly attacking each other.
Right.
And most people, about 70% of the people in America, I call them the frustrated majority, are just sick and tired and fed up with all the anger and the divisiveness.
Yeah.
So it's really a great segue into cancel culture, which I think has experienced rapid growth and has evolved into what is really a toxic environment today. People just don't feel comfortable speaking the truth because they feel like they're going to get canceled. So, Governor, how did an effort that really started as nothing more than holding people accountable for their perspectives become so toxic and so out of control? And how did we get here?
I think it's been a long time coming. I said that when I first, and on my first inaugural, we were pretty excited. It was a snowy day, standing on the steps of the Capitol in Annapolis. And I said, the politics that have divided our nation need not divide our state. It wasn't just over the last 4 years or 8 years. I mean, it was already pretty bad in America where we were becoming more divided. And I think it has to do with social media and the 24-hour, cable news, and just people are in bubbles and only talking to people that agree with each other, and hating the other side, the hatred of the other, and not willing. There's no willingness to cooperate or reach a middle ground, and it's gotten progressively worse to the point where I think we're at a very dangerous point in America, and I think most people are really concerned about the future of our democracy, and it just seems to be, rather than trying to find a way to fix it, it's accelerating and getting worse.
Part of it is media confrontation sells. So, that's, the media will talk to two people and they want to get people who are really opposing viewpoints, and they flash to what's going on, the craziest people talking and yelling at each other in Capitol Hill. And so I think that also encourages the folks at home sitting in their basement in their underwear with a computer or on their phone, yeah, right, or on their phone, and they're instantaneously attacking, and they think that the other side are enemies. And we had politicians refer to the other side as the enemy, versus, maybe it's their competitor, it's their, colleague. It used to be that, in Congress or in the legislature, people would talk about their colleague, the gentle person from such and such, even though they were on a different, party. But a lot of that is broken down. And I think it's, as the governor was saying, people are listening to individual voices. They're not hearing multiple voices. Monica and I were just talking about that a little earlier, that social media algorithms, will start to send you the information that you go to mostly. So you end up only hearing the voices and reading the articles that are something that you already believe in, and you're not used to hearing the other side of the article.
They feed that anger.
It feeds it. It just feeds it in.
Yeah. Yep. You mentioned anger, but why are people so angry? Why are different perspectives the source of anger amongst people? Why can't we respectfully disagree at different positions without it turning into anger?
Well, we should be able to, and that's what we did for 8 years, just down the road from Washington. But it's not what happens in Washington. It's not what happens in our national politics in a lot of places, for the reasons that the Lieutenant Governor just talked about. You're just in these echo chambers, and you're only talking to folks in the algorithms. And if you're a progressive Democrat, you're watching MSNBC, and if you're a conservative Republican, you're watching Fox. If I flipped around to all the channels, I'll go see it, and I want to see what everybody's talking about. It's like a completely different story, right?
Yeah.
And so people, just try flipping around the channels.
Get the same.
And but you get a totally different perspective. So people they don't even know what the other side is talking about. But it used to be. My dad was in Congress back in the '70s, and I remember they would passionately debate issues. They had disagreements, but then they would go out and have a beer together, or the families would, go have dinner together. I knew a lot of Democratic congressmen. They were friends. They would passionately debate in the committee or on the floor. They actually disagreed a lot, but they treated each other with respect. And that's not what we see today. It's like the personal insults and name calling. And so nowadays, if you're in the Republican caucus, Democrat caucus, they yell at you if you try to talk to the other side. There's a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus. That people, they're all moderates that try to work together and find solutions, and they get screamed at by both caucuses. Why are you talking to those people? Well, isn't that what we elected you for? Right. Trying to solve problems and find compromise?
Yeah. We're going to actually come back to your story about your father in a few minutes, but I want to talk a little bit more about your real estate company. We have a number of business owners and entrepreneurs in the room, and many of them feel challenged by climate, which imposes onerous regulations upon them in the hiring process. Requirements which are intended to level the playing field amongst all applicants, but there remain clear statistical evidence that certain segments of our workforce continue to earn less money than others, and we continue to have biases in the workplace. How do we ensure fairness in the workplace while at the same time preserving capitalism and free enterprise, which is something from which you benefited in your real estate company?
Well, not just in the real estate company. It's what we worked on for 8 years in state government. We're big believers in fairness and, giving everybody an opportunity. And we're also big supporters of free enterprise and small businesses. We were I was a small business I ran simply because they were killing all the small businesses, which killed all the jobs. People were fleeing the state in all directions. We were losing businesses, jobs, and taxpayers. That's why we actually came to Annapolis. But we did all kinds of things to try to create more opportunity, from everything from, P-Tech schools where we were going to underprivileged, underserved communities and giving kids an opportunity for the first time, to Second Chance Act and job training programs where people were, returning citizens coming out of incarceration. I was at a thing today in Washington with a group called Opportunity at Work, where we were the first state in America to reduce get rid of the college requirement for 20,000 state jobs, and it gave tremendous opportunity. Now 18 other states, Republican and Democrat, have done the same thing. So it's like you have to provide incentives to help the businesses grow. Small businesses are responsible for 80% of the jobs in America. They're the backbone of our economy. While trying to find ways to be more inclusive and to give people that don't have an opportunity more opportunity to have more fairness in the workplace, but you don't do it by killing the businesses and making it onerous so they can't stay in business, they can't hire people.
Your thoughts?
No, I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, you know, it's good that more people are aware and are thinking in terms of, you know, just diverse workforce. But you have to make sure that the person can do the job, because you can bring a person in and you're going to do harm to them and others if they're not really able to do the job. So that is something that is very important, but it all starts with at least awareness. And sometimes we have to get outside of our own comfort zones, our own bias that we may have. I mean, from a standpoint of bias in terms of the way a person looks or how long or short their hair is, or in my case, if they're coming into the office, or in my case, if they come into the office wearing jeans or dungarees, as I say, or not wearing socks, is Jim here? So, Jim really doesn't wear socks. I don't know where everybody.
Jim, you here? So, Lieutenant Governor, I also want to circle back to your comments as we're talking about dungarees and socks, and we talked earlier about sitting in your
I haven't
basement.
heard anybody call them dungarees in like several decades.
You ought to come hang out at the firm, because he uses that term almost every day.
I got to keep those old terms around.
I actually want to focus on underwear, because you talked about social media and the people sitting around in their underwear at home.
That's why they're angry. Yeah.
Well, so, lost my page, my apologies. Got all flustered with underwear, so. So, social media has really taken over, I think, and is controlling so much of the messaging that's out there today. We have less accountability, we have greater access to public figures, and really almost anything can go viral at any time for all the wrong reasons. Sometimes it's not even a good reason for it. From your point of view, what role has social media played in kind of today's heightened tension around political discourse? And you and I had a conversation the other day about our founding fathers, and whether things were equally tense between some of our founding fathers in our country, and we just didn't know about it because we didn't have social media, or are things actually worse today than they were back then?
You know, that conversation or that question comes up about, is it worse now than it's ever been? And I've had my daughters have said, one in particular have said, it's worse now than ever. And I was like, well, I've lived a lot longer than you have, first of all.
What do you know?
But, you know, we did have a civil war, so things were a little worse when you had, you know, half the country fighting each other. But, you know, the founding fathers were, you know, they were pretty vicious with each other. You didn't have social media. You had pamphlets and these, what they called, broadsides, which were basically a sheet of paper that would be on one issue. They would call each other all kinds of names. There was, you know, attacks on each other. So it was ugly back then. The difference was it wasn't as readily available, and you had a lot of the populace who literally couldn't read. So now anyone can use their phone or their computer or whatever, a device of some sort, tablet, and they can go on and say all kinds of things, true or not true, or take positions. And as we talked about with the algorithms, they'll come in to kind of feed that viewpoint that they may have, that it seems worse, but it puts a greater challenge, I think, on the rest of us, and particularly as we talk to, you know, some folks who might be a little younger, less experienced, to diversify where they're getting their information from, as the governor said.
Yeah.
You know, different channels. Read a newspaper. I know there's some folks out here that in the community college, they probably have never heard of a newspaper, but, you know, read something different than what you typically, you know, will follow on Instagram or X, which is, I don't know what you call it now.
Yeah.
Used to be saying you were tweeting, so what do you call it, Xing?
Xing, yeah.
Okay.
You're so old.
Yeah, I know. And people need to talk to each other. Don't tweet to me. Don't send me a text. Call me. It's supposed to be a phone.
Yeah, I'll just add to that it's not just real people on social media. I mean, there's tremendous amounts of disinformation and misinformation, Russian bots, China. There are people driving to anger because they want to divide America, and they don't pick sides. Like, they'll fire up the left on this issue and fire up the right on that issue because they think dividing us is good. And because of the tools, it can become very effective, and overnight you can have like crazy stuff break out.
So social media is an incredibly powerful tool. How do we use it in a constructive way to actually message facts, message real positions of real people?
Well, ironically, it's how I got elected governor.
I was going to say,
And,
we started with
so,
somebody on Facebook.
We're a Republican in a blue state. We had no money. Nobody believed we could win. We were outspent by $20 million or something, and everybody expected us to get blown out. And I remember watching the Obama campaign and saying, hey, I got to learn about this Facebook thing. Like, it's free, and you could post things and say what you think and the issues, and then people will read it, and you don't have to
You have to buy it.
So we started out with, I was posting myself about the 43 taxes in a row are killing our economy. We're not competitive with the states in our region. And there was 2 or 3 people, and then it was a couple hundred people, and then it was 10,000 people. And then when we announced that we were going to run, and we articulated, we were like nervous first time we ever did it. We were standing up on the stage. Right. At that time, we had like 85,000 people on social media, which was more than the incumbent governor. And it was free. So I now have 700,000 people on Facebook and 300,000 people on Twitter, and I can communicate with them every day. So we try to say positive, good messages. And it used to be they would put everything you put out there, and everyone would see it. But now they changed the algorithm, so you have to pay to put your messages out. And we'll post something to 700,000 people, and no one will see it because they're only pushing.
Yeah, they push what's the
different
paid
stuff. It changed.
Right.
Lieutenant Governor, you talked a little bit about reading the papers. I grew up in the 70s with my dad watching Walter Cronkite every night. He had to run home to make sure he made the 6:30 news, and he concluded the evening news every night with saying, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And, the days of reporting the news in a centrist sort of way without left or right-leaning bias are really gone. Mm-hmm. So you already talked about reading, watching Fox and watching CNBC. What would you tell people about where to get real facts and real news?
Well, I think it comes back to going to multiple sources. Mm-hmm. You have to go to multiple sources to, and sometimes it's looking at the international side of it, look at the BBC as well, but just, being inquisitive, wanting to know information, wanting to know what the other side is thinking. What is the opposite of this argument, the one argument where, I think that this is wonderful, or what's going on is great, whatever the issue is. Why is there a group that doesn't like this position? And try to, understand their positions as well. It is more challenging. There are a lot of media outlets now. I mean, not just the television, the, over-the-air network. Used to be called over-the-air. You got to pay for that now. Called cable or something else. But, streaming cable, But they used to call, CBS, ABC, NBC over-the-air networks. But now, unless you get the digital antenna, you can't get it. But, it's not just those or the cable channels or whatever. It's just having to have a thirst for knowledge and information. And I think a lot of times people aren't inquisitive.
Yeah, well, he said earlier about, they want the controversy, right? And they also want clicks. And so one group is selling it to their, base. The other one is selling it to their base. But a lot of people, I talked about the frustrated majority, they're like watching television, like, what in the heck? I just want to get the news.
Right.
It's all opinion. It's all slanted. It's all biased, both sides. And it used to be you would turn on, they had 3 networks. You could look at all of them, and they would tell you the news. And it was pretty fair and balanced. And now we don't have it very much. But the fastest, and nobody probably even knows about this network, but the fastest growing cable news network right now is a group called News Nation, which you have to just, if you have a voice thing, I didn't know where it was. I didn't know where to find it. You have to say News Nation, and it's on like 900 on my channel. It pops up. It's not with the other, it's not right next to Fox and CNN on your cable channel, But they hired a bunch of former Fox and former CNN people, and their whole mission in life is to have balanced reporting of the news. And it really is pretty good. So I think there's a market for that, which is why they're growing, because most people are like, I can't watch this. I can't watch that.
I'm guessing
I
a lot of
literally,
people in the
I
room
switch
would love
all night long, and I'm like, they're both crazy.
That's true.
Yeah, they've merged news with commentary.
Yeah.
You know, so and a lot of people can't tell the difference between commentary and news, and they've kind of merged them together in terms of these broadcasts, particularly the broadcasts.
It's entertainment, really.
Yeah, it's entertainment. And even in many cases, the newspapers, every now and then I'll say to Monica when I'm reading the paper, the hardcover paper, I said, look at this. This reporter put their opinion in here. They didn't just say what the facts were. They put in their opinion.
Yeah.
You know, they'll say, what such and such meant to say was, you know what they meant to say. They must say totally. Put a quote in.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Governor, earlier this year, you accepted 2 fellowships from Harvard University. In a letter to the Harvard president several weeks ago, you withdrew from participation in those fellowships as a result. They know why. You withdrew from those fellowships because of what you characterized as Harvard's failure to denounce the actions of more than 30 student organizations which celebrated Hamas's terrorism against American and Israeli civilians. What role, if any, should higher education institutions be playing in curbing such behavior? And how do we at the same time protect students' First Amendment rights while not tolerating hate speech?
Yeah, it's thank you for mentioning that. I actually I was doing a fellowship at the University of Chicago at the time when I sent the letter to Harvard. So I'm doing one at American University starting in January. I'm just, I think it's really important to get out there. I was looking forward to engaging with the students and talking about civility and finding common ground. I was going to talk about some of the things we're talking about tonight. So on the one hand, I didn't want to pass up that opportunity to go address them. And frankly, for a guy that barely made it through working through state college at Florida State, it was kind of a big deal to say I'm a fellow at Harvard, right? And to turn it down, I was outraged. And it wasn't just about free speech or people, taking sides or standing up for Israel or supporting the rights of Palestinians or a two-state solution. It was right after these heinous, evil acts of cutting babies out of mothers and beheading children, and it was terrible. And the groups at Harvard were actually supporting the Hamas terrorists, not just having a debate about the Middle East. And they have that right. Even hate speech is protected speech in America. We have freedom of speech, but they don't have the right to have the university, support and condone and help promote their angry, rhetoric that was anti-Semitic and outrageous. And so I'm sure they didn't care that much about me not being at Harvard, but it made a big splash. And there were a lot of people pulling their money out and quitting the board, but it got a lot of attention. And we actually finally, it was very weak and very late, 18 days late and not strong enough, but the president of Harvard finally answered and said, we're not in favor of anti-Semitism. I was like, well, that's
was
nice.
easy.
That's nice of you.
Invite you back? No.
They haven't invited me back yet. But I just thought it was the right thing to stand up. I felt really strongly about it. I was like, I don't want to be condoning this activity. And
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about how extreme politics are on display every day, everywhere we look. Let's talk a little bit about the current state of politics. President Ronald Reagan and Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, while political adversaries, maintained an apparent unified goal of doing what's right for our country. And I believe they were even friends.
yeah.
Contrast that relationship with the one maintained by President Trump and Speaker of the House Pelosi. You can't, right? How do we do away with the angry rhetoric and toxic politics and get back to a Reagan-Tip O'Neill type relationship?
Well, it's something I've been passionate about and talking about for 9 years, even before Trump came down the escalator and before I was chairman of Youth for Reagan, and I'm a big Reagan guy. I gave this speech at the Reagan Foundation in D.C. 2 weeks after the 2020 election, and I went to the last year I was out at the Reagan Library giving a speech and talking about civility I mentioned that Reagan, who again, I said it earlier about they would passionately disagree. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan did not agree on a lot of things, but they both loved America, and they didn't question the other's patriotism, or they both wanted to solve problems just in a different way, and they had this great relationship. They were both, Irish guys that were outgoing, affable, likable guys that weren't flamethrowers, but they had a real friendship, and they reached a lot of agreement. And, Bill Clinton invited me down to speak at the Clinton Library last month and talk this same topic. He and I on the stage talking about it. And I wasn't a big Bill Clinton guy like I was Reagan, but Bill Clinton even worked across the aisle when Newt Gingrich was
Very much so.
speaker, and they passed welfare reform and tax cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the new kind of Democrat, and he was he was fighting against the far left Democrats. So you used to disagree, but you'd find ways to work together. Now it's just, how do I destroy the other person? And there's no simple solution, but it's just civility. We have to get rid of the people who are the angry, crazy people. And we got to elect some people that actually care about working together and solving the serious problems that face the country.
But
I think gerrymandering is also. I think gerrymandering has had an impact too, because it pushes all the Democrats in one area and all the Republicans in one area, so you don't have to appeal to a broader group. And I always talk about like Connie Morella, for those who are old enough to remember, when Connie was the congressperson, and I think the whole district was Montgomery County at the time.
Yeah.
She was a Republican. Montgomery County was just as liberal as it is now, maybe a little less, slightly less, only a little bit. But they elected her every year because she provided the type of leadership that they were looking for in Congress. And I remember talking to, I think Ed McDonald was here, and his former boss from North Carolina, and how someone had come up to him and said, that Connie Morella, she'd never get elected here. And he said to him, the person said, but I wouldn't get elected in her district either. And so it was one of those things where she could appeal to a broader swath of people. Now, of course, the leadership of the other party decided that they wanted to get rid of her, so they divided her district up by three different congressional people. And so it pushed, that district, further to the left. But that's just one example. And they did the same thing in Texas, where they did that to Democrats. And so you end up getting people who are farther to the left than what the populace may have actually been.
Well, there are only a handful of competitive districts in America. Right. And so both parties gerrymander. It's a cancer on democracy. We have far left Democrats, far right Republicans, and nobody comes there wanting to work together. They come there to destroy the other side. And we fought against that for 8 years for nonpartisan redistricting. The legislature refused to take it up every year because they wanted to we were the worst gerrymandering in America. And finally, in our last year, we put together a nonpartisan redistricting commission. The legislature threw it out and said, we're not going to pay attention to that. We're going to gerrymander even more than the worst in the country because we have complete control. And I vetoed it. They overrode the veto because they had a veto-proof majority. So I went out and raised $300,000 to pay lawyers to go sue them because they had the attorney general, and we won the court case. And I'm the only Republican governor in America to throw out gerrymandered maps by a Democratic legislature. We now have fair maps in Maryland and 5 districts that I won by more than 20 points. We only have 1 Republican in the state right now.
Are term limits also something we need to be looking at to make sure that we're getting a balanced legislature?
Yeah, that would be very nice. Yeah, because what
was that question?
Term limits.
Yeah,
it would be great. I mean,
I'm a big believer in term
You
limits.
can look at some of the senators that we have that are creaking around in Washington. Dianne Feinstein was a wonderful senator, and I remember when she was in California before that, but she shouldn't have stayed there that long. And I also blame, to a certain extent, I think the families should have been working with her to come out. And there's still some folks up there that, have been there a little too long. And I think their families should be tapping them on the shoulder and saying, Grandpa, it's time not to drive, okay?
Sometime great-grandpa.
Hey, great-grandpa. Give me the keys, okay?
So, Lieutenant Governor, last month, the members of the House of Representatives removed the Speaker of the House and then embarked upon a process of electing his replacement. Was the spectacle our country witnessed for nearly 3 weeks an example of democracy at work, or was it an example of uncompromising extreme politics?
I'd say it was both. I mean, democracy can be very, very ugly. It's like making sausage. It might taste good, but you don't really want to see it, when it's being made. So it's a little bit of both. It was a process that, unfortunately, they agreed to. McCarthy agreed to this to allow for one person to bring this up, and then you had a small group of, I guess, a group of 8 out of the caucus, 1% of the caucus that ousted him. But I think it was Winston Churchill once said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that we've tried before. So, it is a little bit of both. It shows dysfunction. They did come together. We'll see how that plays out. But at the same time, it is the ugly process.
Well, it's not the normal process, right? It was ridiculous that they call them the crazy 8 is what McCarthy
the crazy
calls them, but 8 people threw out the Speaker.
Right.
When 94% of the Republican caucus supported the Speaker. That usually majority rules in a democracy, but McCarthy had agreed to this when he couldn't get to become the Speaker in the 14 round. So it was a kind of a poison pill that he set himself up for failure. But the fact that 8 people could throw the whole nation into this crazy situation while we were dealing with the government
critical
not being funded, while we have the war in Ukraine, we've got the war in Israel, and we got 8 people trying to make a spectacle of themselves. I mean, I think every one of those 8 people should be removed from Congress, and I think they ought to focus on their job.
Yeah.
So you really see it more as a spectacle and extreme
I mean, I think
politics
it was just ridiculous. And I get you disagree, but that's what the caucus is for. If 94% of the people say, we're going to make Boyd Rutherford the Speaker, then the 8 people that don't like him should just get in line. That's the way it's supposed to work. But I think it just proved that we can't govern. So here, the Republicans are trying to say we should be in charge. We showed that we couldn't lead. And they may lose the House as a result of it. I mean, I think
they will.
there's a very good possibility Republicans win the Senate and lose the House because of that nonsense.
Well, and particularly if Trump is at the top of the ticket.
Well, great segue. You didn't think you'd get away tonight without talking about the No Labels Party, did you? So you serve as the national co-chair, so you've got some unique perspectives. We are less than a year out from the next presidential election, and it currently appears that the 2024 race will be a rematch between one man facing approximately 100 indictments on a federal and state level, some of which, some would argue, are politically motivated, and one man over the age of 80, who some would argue is struggling with both physical and cognitive issues. How did we get here, and why don't we have a better choice?
Well, that's the $1 million question. It's part of
the $1 million question's coming up. Questions now, so.
I mean, it's a product of everything we've talked about tonight. In that, the party structures, who shows up in the primary, the kind of the loudest voices, the angriest politics. A small group of people is making the decisions on either end, and Donald Trump, in spite of all of his challenges, he still has about 50% of the Republican Party that wants to vote for him, and there up until recently were 11 other choices, and nobody was getting ahead. So he looks as if he's the likely nominee, even though he's not the strongest Republican nominee in a general election for sure. Biden, he really is struggling, and 59% of the Democrats in America do not think he should be the nominee. So current polls show 70% of the people in America do not want a rematch. They do not want Joe Biden or Donald Trump to be president. And yet, it looks as if that might be the choice. And that's frustrating to a lot of people. They're like, how did we get here? And what do we do about it? Because we're at a very fragile time in the history of our country and democracy. And so there's never been another real alternative before. No Labels, I've been involved in for about 3.5 years. After I chaired the National Governors Association, where I got all 50 governors to agree on lots of important issues. It was very, very bipartisan, actual collaboration, the opposite of what happens in Congress. This group approached me. They've been around for 13 years. Joe Lieberman was the founding chairman. There are Republicans and Democrats involved, and their whole premise is what I was all about, which was finding middle ground, compromise, negotiations, problem solving. They had a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus that had 60-some members, half Republican, half Democrat. They're the ones that come together on every issue to try to fix things. And so I've been out there, trying to help, espouse those goals. Now they've got a new idea, which not my idea, and I'm not sure if it's a great idea or if it can work. But they're saying if 70%, if those are the two nominees, we get to Super Tuesday, and it's Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and 70% of the country does not want choice A or choice B, that they're talking about the possibility, and it's not final yet, of putting together. They don't want to create a third party. They're not going to create a party. They're not going to run anybody for any other office. They're not going to run for anything ever again. They're talking about, maybe one time for the good of the country, to have the courage to put the country above party, and to have a joint unity ticket with a Republican and a Democrat running together saying we're going to try to put the country back on track.
Yeah, it'd be nice to vote for someone versus voting against somebody for a change. So I think the public wants that.
The public does want that.
Maybe we get the old Hogan Rutherford team back together.
What do y'all think?
Get the band back together.
So what I'm hearing is there's some concerns among Democrats and never Trumpers that a no labels candidacy, maybe like you described, really guarantees Trump a victory.
Yeah.
I mean, is that
Well,
true?
nobody knows if that's true, and I guess it depends on whether you're running a Democrat or a Republican at the top of the ticket and what they're who they're appealing to. But right now it appears, I think it's because their argument is the Trump base is more solid, that there's people that no matter what they're going to vote for Trump, and Biden has not much of a solid base. But they are the two least popular presidents in American history running against each other. They're both at 30% approval, so it's like it's a race to the bottom. Which one is worse? I'm not sure. But the Democrats are losing their mind. Right now there are 3 Democrats, there's multiple Democrats running in the primary, but there's 3 Democrats already running in the general election. So Robert Kennedy Jr. is pulling 24% of the vote. They have Cornel West is pulling 5%, and this Jill Stein, who killed the race for Hillary last time, is in the race too. So, but all they talk about is no labels, and it's a threat to democracy. To have people participating in the process is a threat to democracy. It's just crazy. So I don't know. That's their argument because they have a candidate that's pretty weak. And I would say if the Democrats are that concerned that their candidate is that weak, that they should put up a stronger candidate. And I just think they can't. There's people that are going to make a very hard decision. I talk to people every day that say, I can't vote for either one of them. They're like, I'm a Republican, but I just can't vote for Trump again. But I'm not voting for Biden. And I have Democrats that say he's too old, and I don't want Kamala Harris running the country.
So media outlets have been buzzing for the last week on the heels of Senator Joe Manchin's announcement that he will not be seeking re-election and speculating about a Manchin-Hogan ride. Since it's just the 3 of us in the room having an intimate conversation.
By the fireside.
When can we expect your announcement?
Not tonight. There's always, the media, again, it chases whatever the latest story is. Joe Manchin is a friend. I like Joe Manchin. I think he's, the kind of person that's willing to find compromise, what we've been talking about. He's in a very tough place because he's, like I'm in a state that was 33% Biden. He's in a state that was like nearly 40% Trump. He's a Democrat.
Most Trumps.
The polls show him losing his re-election race by 28 points or something. So he can't continue to be a senator in West Virginia. And so the speculation was, well, maybe there's something else. And I frankly reached out to Joe after his announcement, but we've been missing each other, connected. So I don't know what his real plans are. I know he cares about the country. He's been involved in no labels for 10 years. But I don't know that he's actually considering running or not. I can't speak for him. But I think they're all waiting to see. Nobody wants to be a spoiler. Like, nobody wants to say, oh, we only got a few percent and it made Joe Biden the president or it made Donald Trump the president. It would only be if you say, hey, we can actually win this thing. And it's never been done before. So people are a little skeptical, but I don't know if it's possible or not, or who the potential candidate should be.
Something, and I remember a gentleman talking about this, that when we ran 9 years ago, it wasn't where there were 70% of the public saying that they didn't like the incumbent or they didn't like the candidates. And there were folks saying that we had no chance. So it's almost like it's, if Maryland were the country, which it's not, we had less of a chance to win than a potential third party would have a chance to win because.
Well, if you go back to 2014, there was not a soul that believed that we had a chance to win. Yeah. Not one single person ever said to me,
maybe our wives.
No, they didn't think
they didn't believe it either.
They didn't even think we could win. But now people are saying, I think that's why you should do this, or I think it's possible. And I was like, have you been drinking? But yeah, I think there's more. People are so frustrated. I hear it everywhere I go. Please run. Please fix this. What do we do? How do we? I go all across the country and I'm hearing this kind of stuff. There are people in both parties that are very fed up. They're lifelong Democrats or lifelong Republicans. And they're like, John F. Kennedy once said, sometimes party loyalty demands too much. And maybe this is that point where people are like I've been involved. I wasn't been a Republican since I was 10 years old. I said I was a youth for Reagan. I watched the stuff. I'm not sure. I recognize this part. And I hear Democrats saying the same thing. They're like, too far left for me. It doesn't represent, where I am.
So I think the problem is, regardless of whether it's Trump or Biden or some third party, we're a divided country.
Yeah.
And the day after the election, there's still 51% of the people that are happy and 49% that are frustrated. What advice would the two of you give to an incoming president on how to try to bring our country together and eliminate that divide and that gap that exists?
Well, I think it's, we sort of showed the roadmap. I mean, when we came in, there were a lot of people not happy with us being in Annapolis, right? There was kind of a monopoly, and they were like, why are they sharing the sandbox? Who are they? Why are they here?
Right.
But we came in with the attitude that we want to work together. We couldn't accomplish anything without Democrats. We were outnumbered 70%, right? They could just ignore us, and they could override every veto, but they didn't. We cut taxes 8 years in a row by $4.8 billion. We turned a $5 billion deficit into a $5 billion surplus. I mean, we passed tremendous amount of legislation on a lot of things, bipartisan. They never do that in Washington. So I think whoever comes in has got to be honestly willing to do that. And Biden said that that's how he won.
He said it when he was running.
When he was running and in his inaugural. I want to bring the country together. I want to be the president for all of America, not just blue states and red states. It sounded good. But then they just kind of moved to the left and started attacking Republicans. So, I mean, these people that really actually, I think we're at the point where we've hit the wall, where people are like, we're concerned about the country. Let's forget about the red jerseys and the blue jerseys for a while. And, I gave my farewell address in our state house, oldest state house in America, where George Washington gave his farewell address. And then George Washington railed against the evils of parties, said it was going to be the ruination of our democracy. I mean, maybe it's time that, I'm not saying we do away with the parties. I'm still I want to get my Republican Party back to the party of, the bigger tent Reagan-esque party that stands for something. But maybe, sometimes, maybe parties aren't the thing this time. Maybe it's about the country. Put the country first.
Yeah, I think I think whoever comes in as the new president, as the governor is saying, they need to move away from just the hardcore partisanship and work toward bringing everyone together. And like was said, President Biden, said this in his speeches. He said it running up. And then, you start listening to your consultants and you listen to the political folks around you and say, you got to do this. And the folks on Capitol Hill want you to take a particular position. The person has to be strong enough to say, we're going to work, because most of the country, and I will say this about Maryland, is really a centrist country. Center right, center left, but pretty much in the center. And there's, like the bell curve, you got small groups that are loud, but they're on the extreme sides of both of them. And so I think the person who would come in, he or she I'm hoping for a she, there's only one that's in the race, would, come in and be able to, be above it. The president should be above the partisanship, quite frankly. They really should be. And they should stand above it, fight for what they believe in, but at the same time not get into the gutter with, what happens on the partisan level.
So we're going to open up the conversation for some questions from our guests, but I want to ask one final question before we go there. We all leave here this evening and return to business as usual tomorrow morning. What advice would you give the people here tonight about how to take this conversation to the next level, whether it's talking to friends, family, colleagues, community members? How do we take what we began here tonight and propel it forward in a unified way?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I'm really thankful that everybody came out tonight for the discussion. I think it's mostly the Lieutenant Governor's a pretty big draw, but I think they like the topic of, people are concerned. And
Hey, they were laughing though.
That was Jeff.
I talked to some business people who are so fed up that they're giving up. I talked to people who just like, oh my God, I'm so sick of politics, and they're just tuning it out. Yeah. And I would just say, please don't give up, because the people in this room are the ones, we can't afford to just let it continue, right? I'm sick of it too. I mean, it's easy to walk away and say, we can't fix it. But I think I'm not willing to give up, and I don't think anybody in this room, I think it's very important that he tried it.
Well, I think that conversations need to start at a level of trust, and you need to listen, but also, talk to people, not just, use the electronic media to reach out to one another. But it's, as you mentioned before, a lot of us are going to be sitting around a Thanksgiving table, and there's going to be conversations going to veer one way or the other, but it's, try to make sure that people stay respectful and, come from a position of honesty and of trust. And I think that helps. And vote in the primaries, because what happens is the extremists are in the primaries.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time to have this conversation. I think this is such an important topic. We could go on all evening. I think many of us here enjoy this type of dialogue, and I think we could do this all night. But I think our friends in the audience would be thrilled to have an opportunity to participate in the conversation. So before jumping in, I'd like to set the stage. Our firm's marketing team is in the theater with microphones. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and they will get to as many of you as time permits. We ask that you walk to the end of your aisle to meet our team members. And unfortunately, we're unlikely to have time for follow-up questions, so I ask that you be mindful of allowing others the opportunity to speak as well. Finally, we've just enjoyed some very candid and perhaps even uncomfortable discussions in the name of bridging the gap and finding common ground. I hope we can continue that trend during this portion of the program. And if you're all game, we can go ahead and begin with the first question. I can't see any of you, so I'm hoping that...
You can't see anyone, so we have to listen.
Yeah, got one right here.
An immigrant who got drafted into the U.S. Army, became a U.S. citizen to go to Vietnam, the Special Forces. I've always been an independent. I've always been a dreamer, a lover of America. So here's my perfect scenario and the question. What's the scenario and who should we select if Trump goes to jail before the election and Biden says, I don't need to be there anymore, I've been protecting the country from Trump, and now we have, for the first time, a true free-for-all. Who are the three best people on each side, the Republican and Democratic side, that you would think should be there to give us a real choice?
That's an easy one for the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, we certainly have one right here, right?
Well, first of all, just let me say thank you for your service and thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
And I don't like to speculate, but it's not that far from the possibility of what
Yeah.
might happen. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but two of my friends who are running for president are both U.S. attorneys, Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson, and they'll tell you that federal prosecutors have a 95% success rate, and he's got 90-some charges. I mean, they're convinced, regardless of whether people believe it's unfair prosecution or not, that he will be convicted of multiple felonies. And there was a Republican debate where they said, if Trump is convicted of felonies, will you still support him? And 6 people raised their hands. And I thought that was outrageous, because in most places in America, you can't even vote if you're a felon.
Right.
How
can you get a
You can't
security
serve on a
clearance?
jury, but you could be the leader of the free world.
Right.
So it's going to be a constitutional crisis. And look, I said earlier, Joe Biden, I'm hopeful. You talked about taking the keys away from granddad. I don't say this to be demeaning to Joe Biden, and I don't want to criticize any president, but his family, I would think, would say, it's not good for you, it's not good for our family, not good for the party or the country. Like, it's time. It's time for him to move on, and I don't think Trump should be the nominee. I'm still hopeful, although it's not looking very likely. I'm trying to hope that someone can rise up and win, but I don't know. I don't want to go through picking the top 3 people in both parties. In case that happens, is a pretty complicated thing. I like to see somebody that actually cares more about the country and solving the problems and being a leader than actually caring about their own political career or playing to the base.
Right.
Yeah.
Agree.
Do we have another question?
See some people standing.
I'm Tom Goldberg from Bethesda. I did not serve in the military, but I do serve every Thanksgiving. Governor, I'm way at the top.
Yeah.
As my ancestors came both from Russia in the 1910s, landed in Locust Point, but the other part came from Palestine. So if you want to know about politics at Thanksgiving, I think, hold our own. In any case, a couple of quick comments. Number one, it is those of you who are inspirational, who inspire. You have to get in, if nothing more, than to give license to people who feel and act like you to get into the game. The question or comment made earlier about why are we in the trouble we're in is in part because we've let the inmates run the asylum. The people who run are not qualified to serve in many instances, in my opinion. Lastly, I would ask, and this I give credit to John F. Kennedy and his team of speechwriters, as well as to Ronald Reagan, for whom I worked for a while, and his speechwriters. Eloquence, speaking to the heart, grabbing the attention of all Americans through the use of very, very good words. The best speech ever given on television, in my opinion, was John F. Kennedy's speech on civil rights in 1962. If you haven't seen it, you have to re-see it, and I give Ted Sorensen great credit for that. But that, with regard to Bull Connor, to the governor of Alabama at the time, was what brought a lot of people out from behind the do-nothing shell. And I think as you go forward, please inspire more, because I think it makes a big difference. I saw this talk as a fireside and a banner below a news feed and called the law firm today to get here. I think we need greater exposure, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, to what you're doing, and I think the country needs it more than ever. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Emily, do we have any other questions?
Hi there. Thanks for coming. My name is Matt Skinner. I guess I've been paying attention to politics and current events since attending Boyd State at the Naval Academy in 1973. Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of big issues facing the country, one of which Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, I think, tweaked Social Security way back in the 1980s. I do not believe anybody's done anything serious about it since. I remember the fiscal cliff being discussed when Bill Clinton ran for election in '92. From my perspective, here in Maryland, we're watching the National Democrats, whether it was President Obama, President Biden, or every time Senator Sarbanes or Senator Mikulski or Senator Cardin or maybe now Chris Van Hollen runs for office, they say, I saved Social Security. I kept those rascally Republicans from cutting it. The fiscal cliff is no longer a fiscal cliff, as you know. It's a tsunami that's about 6 years or on the Maryland Eastern Shore from just swamping us. Do you think the current Democrat Party, not the Joe Liebermans or the David Borans or even the Joe Manchins, will they have the will to come to the table, both in the House or in Chuck Schumer's Senate, to work on a solution to this problem?
Well, here we had a whole conversation about, bringing people together and not talking about Republicans and Democrats, and he's hitting the Democrats right away. See, it's just kind of angry politics that we have to do. I'm just kidding. It's a huge issue. I think, frankly, neither party's been serious about fixing the serious issues, and Social Security is going to go bankrupt if we don't come up with a solution. And but it's we went further into debt under Trump than under any previous president. So it's not just Democrats that have been spending us into oblivion. I mean, it's a different story. We have to try to, the states are different than the federal government, but we came in, Maryland was in the worst shape it had ever been in, the largest deficit in history, $5 billion. We had taxed everybody out of the state. We had lost 100,000 jobs, 10,000 businesses. There was a Gallup poll said 48% of all the people wanted to move out of the state. And we completely turned it around. We went from 49th out of 50 states in economic performance to number 6. And we did it, with a Democratic legislature. We cut taxes with a Democratic legislature. We're the only Republican administration to do that in the country. We cut more taxes in Maryland than DeSantis did in Florida, and we had all Democrats that wanted to raise taxes. So we need people in Washington that can actually talk seriously about these issues. I mean, there are some people, they're kind of the holy grail. You can't say anything. I mean, people are going to be panicked about, I can't lose my... But if you talk about, young people now that are entering in that maybe they have to extend longer, maybe we have fixes that can balance it. But it's going to go bankrupt, Social Security is, and we're so far in debt, and we got nobody being serious in Washington. So we're going to have a stalemate. We're about to shut down the government in a couple of days again, in some ways arguing about this, but that's not a solution that we keep kicking the can down the road every year.
Yeah, the challenge, a lot of it with Social Security is that one side will play the other side in terms of, it's going to take the money away from, grandma or not so grandma. They're going to take the money away from him versus, let's look at what we can do. And as the governor said, looking at younger people, maybe they should have an alternative to 100% of it being invested by Social Security Administration and hoping that money is there and maybe utilized.
Martin O'Malley's going to run that. He could get it all straightened out.
No comment on that. Maybe I should start getting my Social Security now. I don't know. But that's, so yeah, as the governor said, I think both parties are scared to really touch it. They look at it as the third rail. Whoever's the first one to say something about reforming Social Security, the other side is going to say, you're trying to take the money away from grandma, you're going to do this. And so then of course the media loves controversy, and so that goes around.
Yeah. No easy answers.
No.
My question is about AI, and I saw an experiment with about 10 kids. They presented them with a false narrative, and only one child had the courage to stand up and say, this is wrong. And they asked him, why did he say it? And he said, because he had read in a book.
Actually read in a book.
I read in a book that wasn't true, and the kids didn't believe him, and they kind of ostracized him until they stood up and said he was correct. Bridging that to society today, what do you think we can do to educate the general population as well as our government officials about the impacts of AI, both good and bad?
There's a lot of talk about AI as if it's really new. When we talk about these algorithm, in a sense, that is artificial intelligence. It's just gotten more powerful now, and they are opening it up to the broader public than what it was before. The social media companies were utilizing something that is equivalent to it. In terms of, I think that, we put a lot on our schools, but also families need to engage more with their children, you know, in terms of, okay, let's put that phone down. You know, you don't need to constantly have your hand in front of you and your neck craned over looking at the latest things on Instagram or whatever. Let's have some conversations. Let's talk about what you're seeing and what you're reading. And, you know, and the families need to be more engaged themselves. But, you know, again, it's trying to encourage being inquisitive, to really try to understand the issues that are around. I mean, you're right. There are a lot of people that just don't understand how our system of government works. I'm a big believer that we really need to get back to civics in school, you know, and not. I mean, the governor and I, many times people will come up to us and they're complaining about something that they wanted, no longer want us to fix, but wanted us to fix. And you talk to them, and it's a federal issue. It's something that the federal government does. The state doesn't do that. That's a federal matter. Or they're talking about something that's purely local, and it's a city issue. And you don't want to say, that's not my issue, that's someone else. But you're trying to explain to them the different roles of government. And they would say, you know, I remember when I worked for the president, and people would say, well, he's the president. He can make them do this. And it's like, oh, you're talking about, you know, cutting down trees in your neighborhood. It's not federal property, you know, so, you know, that's not something that happens that way. But yeah, I think civics education is one way, but families need to be much more engaged with their younger people, their children.
Emily?
Hello.
My name is Mei Jiang. I'm also an immigrant, relatively newer immigrant, so I might have more of like fresh out of box view. Something to encourage everyone today. So I like progressive liberal views, but I also think I'm more Democrat, but I also think Republicans are also very progressive, liberal, compared with so many other countries and cultures. So as a whole, I think we have something really great, like above a lot of countries and cultures. So I think what's really discouraging or disappointment is the extreme on both sides. That's kind of tearing this great thing down. So, Governor Hogan, you have a platform as a centrist, sort of bring those extremes to the center. So how would you use that platform to kind of multiply that reasonable voice? And like, yeah, how would you do that to help this country?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and welcome to New Immigrant. I don't want to get sidetracked from that, but my wife Yumi is a first-generation immigrant from South Korea, and I'm so proud of her. She was a good example. I think, first of all, immigration is one thing, by the way, we can find a middle ground on. That's another one of these issues where we're talking past one another. Like the Republicans will say, we got to build the wall, and the Democrats are like, talking about the opposite of that. And we can't have open borders. We can't have millions of people crossing the southern border. We don't know who they are. But we have to have a immigration system that makes sense. So the common sense position is, let's secure the border and fix our broken immigration system. I mean, that's something that most people in America agree with. Right. But everybody's out blaming each other. It's like, right. Obama actually built more wall than Trump did, but the Democrats didn't want to fund Trump's building of the wall. Now we have millions of people crossing. We have problems right now with some Hamas people crossing the border. We have drugs. We have fentanyl, with all kinds of issues. But we also have people that are trying to, America is still, the people across the world still look to America for leadership. They want to come to America because the American dream. We're still the place everybody looks to. And we're a welcoming place. We're a nation of immigrants. We're all, you know, we came from somewhere. So I think we've got to stop the illegal immigration, and we got to work to try to bring in people that we have the skills that we need. Our workforce doesn't have the workforce. We need people to take those jobs. But the other part of your question about how do we multiply this, there's no easy answer. There are a lot of people that feel this way. Like 70% of the people in America feel this way, but they're not in elective office. So the comment earlier here was, how do you get people, you know, that are like us to be willing to run for office? And the problem is it's a problem that keeps getting worse because people are like, I don't want to be a part of that crazy nonsense.
Right.
That's nuts. You have really talented people that would make great congressmen or senators or governors or presidents, and they're like, I'm not going to subject myself to that. And so we don't get the good people, and we get people whose only interest is in self-promotion. I call it performative politics, and all they care about is how many Twitter followers or how much crazy stuff they can say on cable news. And they don't care about fixing the problems. And so it's a chicken and egg problem. We need more good people, but the politics is so bad we don't get any good people. And so we've just got to get people like you to stay involved and to talk to the people that you work with and your friends and tell them not to give up. And some of you have to consider running for office.
Well, I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you very much.
How was that? That was an amazing discussion. Governor Hogan, Lieutenant Governor Rutherford, we're so appreciative of your unique insights into extreme politics, your lessons in leaderships, your willingness to go there with us tonight. Thank you very much. Governor Hogan, we know your schedule is very busy. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this session tonight.
Hey, well, thank you for bringing in my friend as a partner in your firm.
Well, thank you, and he's our partner now. Lieutenant Governor Rutherford Boyd, it's truly an honor to work with you, and thank you for leading our government relations practice and the wisdom and the unique experience you brought to our government contracting practice. It's a pleasure to work with you every day and your unique sense of humor.
Dungarees.
Paul, this event was
let me just say,
yeah.
I had to educate some folks. Jeff and I are kind of the senior group in the firm, and I had to educate some folks on where fireside chat actually came from. There were a couple of people who did not realize that, you know, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, you know, the fireside chats on the radio. So for some of those who probably are community college students, just let you know, that's what happened.
There's no fire here, though.
I know. That's why I kept saying without the fire.
And every night he leaves and says, "Good night, John Boy."
Good night. Right. And Mary Ellen, yep.
So that took a lot of educating in our.
That also took some education.
Paul, thank you for your moderation. This event was your vision. I know being a moderator is not an easy job, but you did a great job, and thank you for. Thank you for finding the middle. And thank you again to all of you, our guests. This truly has been our pleasure to have you for tonight's discussion. This was a very important conversation. I'm hoping we can continue this dialogue. Wouldn't it be great if this became the first of a series of community discussions of this kind? And wouldn't it also be great if other communities were to emulate this? So this would not be a DARS event if we didn't spend a lot more time connecting and enjoying delicious food and refreshments and drinks. So all curated by our friends Steve and Patty Wecker. From their two restaurants, Cured and Iron Bridge. Please join us for dessert. We're having coffee and a reception area, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you for being here.